The third issue then is the issue of carbon trading as the mechanism that the capitalists want to use to manage the world environment. They want to have a global cap on emissions and then allow the corporations to trade within that cap so they can maximize efficiency and bring the cap down. And that was a strategy that Al Gore, the US Vice President in 1997, was bringing to the Kyoto Protocol as his way of saying the United States will join the Kyoto Protocol if you let our corporations keep polluting forever and have the ability to pay for that by privatizing the air. That's what I think carbon trading represents, the privatization of the air. And for South Africa and for Brazil, this means the clean development mechanism and some of the other techniques of offsetting so that the North can keep polluting but claim that they're investing in projects in the South, many of which are very disastrous. The forest projects under the RED system are a good example where indigenous people are saying we reject these because it's an enclosure, it's a capture of our forests and their commodification. Now these are the struggles over the techniques of global climate management. So let me make my first big point, which is they're failing. The first point, which is the emissions cuts, was not enough. The second point, which is the climate debt, is not enough. And the third point, they're still committed to the markets, to the carbon trading, and hence to Wall Street and to the City of London as the main mechanism for managing global environmental policy. So we're rejecting all of these in the climate justice movement. There's a very good debate about whether the climate justice movement should be in alliance with third world countries, the national elites, who want to retain the Kyoto Protocol differential responsibilities. A debate we can get into that brings north-south struggle and internal class struggle into some conflict sometimes. But the main point is that the elites have failed on those points, and that's why when we saw what happened in Copenhagen, the climate justice movement was disgusted, but no one was very disappointed. I think most of us that went into Copenhagen realized that the power balance was so adverse that any deal would have been a bad deal in Copenhagen. So they got a very bad deal, the Copenhagen Accord, with Brazil and India and South Africa and China giving a small amount of legitimacy. But basically we got a deal that is unacceptable, and nobody can defend what happened in Copenhagen. Which then brings us finally to planning for a new world climate order from below. We agree that from below, above, there is no hope. The elites are making deals with each other, and their internal interests are to promote the cause of their own fossil fuel industries and their own overconsumption. Well, what are we doing then from below to generate a new world climate order, and what will that tell us about our politics for the next period? In the short term, since we cannot expect the global elite that just failed in Copenhagen to come to Cancun, Mexico in November for the next big meeting, and we cannot expect them to meet again in Toronto as the G20, Brazil, South Africa, China, India, and the G8 and a few other countries. We cannot expect them to do anything to change the situation there. What we're doing from below is more important. And that is 5 areas of struggle. Number one is to make the case that the global elites are not doing a good job. And therefore, our defensive struggle is to delegitimize the global scale. The second level is the national level. What are we doing at the levels of our own countries? Again, in a Brazil, in a South Africa, even especially where Brazil is making the Copenhagen Accord a national law, it is the same job as to delegitimize the national elites who are lining up with the fossil fuel industries in their countries and promoting growth as usual, export-led growth, minings and mineral and extractive industries. So this is our struggle in South Africa, that we are looking for the solidarity from around the world to try to stop the model from apartheid to post-apartheid that has done so much damage. And that means, my second point, that the national scale is the climate becomes part of our organizing for economic and social and environmental justice by denying them legitimacy and continuing to raise the question of the climate. But what do we want instead of just delegitimizing, what is it that we want to do at national level? Here we actually have some lessons from the United States, of all places, where they have an environmental protection agency which does have the legal power to regulate pollutants. And in Brazil and in South Africa, we also have national agencies which we need to go and protest against if they are not going to limit the emissions of greenhouse gases. In South Africa, we even have a law, the Air Quality Act, that we are now pushing to become applicable to greenhouse gases. So it seems to me that one of our politics is to reclaim the state from the neoliberals and make sure that we can use whatever state agencies and laws to try to get emissions cut directly, not using any carbon trading, cap and trade, but instead direct command and control. And then the fourth level, I've said global delegitimize, national delegitimize, but national, let's find regulatory command and control. Those are the three. The fourth and the fifth, I think you do anyway. On the fourth levels, we find we can intervene with the government agencies that do planning. Your Porto Alegre Municipal Planning Agency that must give permission for projects, or your utility commission that looks at the way in which your electricity is supplied. These are the next layers, the next scales of the politics that we want to make interventions in, to stop climate destruction using these tools, especially where we can stop very destructive developments, major developments. In South Africa, that includes, I must tell you, Brazilian comrades, our 2010 FIFA World Cup stadiums. When you come and visit us to cheer on the Brazilian team, and the South African team will lose early, so we will also be cheering Brazil, you'll be coming to the big stadiums, which are a terrible waste of money when we have enormous unmet needs. And finally, comrades, the fifth point of intervention for climate justice to generate a new politics is a very simple one. It's what you do in Plantar. It's what our comrades in Nigeria do in the Niger Delta. It's what the Ecuadorians do, the indigenous people and the environmentalists in the Yasuni Park in the Amazon. It's what the activists in Canada do in Alberta. It's what the British do in the coal fields. It's what the Australians do in Newcastle, where they block the ships bringing the coal out. It's what we're trying to do in South Africa with the coal mines. And it's a very simple slogan. It's to keep the oil in the soil and to leave the coal in the hole and to leave the tar sand in the land. And those simple messages that we cannot afford to keep burning fossil fuels means that the activists, the organizers, the academics have a bigger responsibility to find the sources of CO2 and other greenhouse gases, to find the extraction and the production, and to directly intervene to stop them. And where we've seen this work is the Niger Delta in Africa. Because of the activism of Ken Saro-Wiwa and the Ogoni people, and the movement for the emancipation of the Niger Delta, 80% of the oil in the Niger Delta cannot be extracted. The activists there are saying we're going to keep the oil in the soil, we're going to leave the coal in the hole, and we're going to keep the tar sand in the land. And finally, that means the politics that we are engaging with in trying to generate a new climate order has to involve global vision and skepticism. And it has to be about taking back control of our national states, and it has to be about making interventions at every level we can to stop capital from extracting and burning fossil fuels. I think there are so many areas in which all of our work feeds into the climate. And the biggest problem in the World Social Forum is failing to bring all of these areas of work where we can be generating similar values and strategies and tactics and alliances and bringing these together. Just like when we fought 10 years ago in Seattle at the World Trade Organization to stop the elites from doing a bad deal so we could get our economies back to something more reasonable. We have to do the same, and that's why our great leader in South Africa, Dennis Brutus, who died on December 26th, he said we need to Seattle Copenhagen. We need to stop the elites at the world level from carrying out the capitalist strategy for a new world order. Dennis will be commemorated tonight at the Gazo Metro nearby here, along with Daniel Ben Said, and I'm sure Howard Zinn, who died yesterday. And we will be commemorating these great visionaries. And for Dennis Brutus, if he was here, he would leave you with the thought he always did at the World Social Forum, 2 words from South Africa. Amandla, power, Aweto, to the people. Amandla, power, Aweto, to the people. Amandla, Aweto. Thank you, comrades.